Okay, good. Let's get started. Yes, that one's better. Cool. Thanks for joining. Today we have two big topics that we want to cover to help you improve the way you're delivering SAP-based integration. The first is about Git and how you can use the tool to improve the way you're delivering SAP integration. And then the second part is about how to migrate from PI to CPI, where we also have a tool that can help in those processes. And obviously, I don't think you can run the full tool without having, or the migration becomes a lot simpler if you understand how to use the FigAF tool to test, manage, and handle the migrations parts. So that's what we want to cover today. And as always, put in questions in the chat if there's anything you want to see or have questions on. So first off, if we start talking about Git, people will immediately think about, oh, this is DevOps, this is the important part, and we want to cover and understand all of it, and we need to use Azure DevOps or some other platform or GitHub actions to handle all our flow. We tried to set up, using these Gradle plugins that you would see later on today, to set up a process that enable you to do these things, and tried the SAP ones also. And there is some challenges that you need to understand how you would actually be able to deliver, because you have two places where you would be delivering. You have the Git repository where you would have all the artifacts of the iFlow, and then you have the Web IDE where you would be working on your BPMN model. And you need to understand which of these places make sense and why it makes sense to have such a process in place to handle these things. If you are going to create a change, who owns the code is often a big challenge, because the data can only has one valid location, and then you need to synchronize and desynchronize these things. Also, if you have multiple developers working on the same iFlow, that is bound to create some challenges, because who would be deploying it the right way when you're testing it, and suddenly someone redeploys it without you knowing. So that model does not really make sense as long as we do not have like a more developer focused environment where you can run things on your laptop. Hopefully that will come. And then I guess there's this thing about how much integration developers know development and how much it is just low code, no code things. And if you start doing transport, you would end into this problem about understanding what's actually being changed, because the BPMN model that you're seeing is really difficult to actually understand the changes in and what they are impacting without a visual tool for it, as we saw with the FigAF tool for the transport. So why do you want to use Git? I think it's obviously a standard way of handling development, making it a lot easier for developers to get access to code, and it's a lot easier to deliver and speed up the integration process. And we will also see that you could use reuse some of the test cases to actually run your Groovy code directly. But yeah, we just see the Git as a file store where you have access to all your integration artifacts, and they're pushed continuously. And this, as one of the questions earlier is also a good way to have all of your iFlows backed up continuously. So the way the process works is, and this is what we have seen so far, that the FigAF system handles the synchronization all changes happens from here to the Git repository. Then we push them into a Git repository, and from this Git repository users can pull the data and be able to work with it. They have the option to upload it directly to the CPI system if they want to, and we'll show you what kind of options we have there. And they can commit it back in here, but we do not have any way to get data back into the FigArf tool this way. It all needs to go down here. So normally I recommend that the only thing you would be committing would be test cases or specific changes that make sense to share globally. We have some Gradle plugins, and these are open source plugins, and as we said, this can actually be used to create a DevOps pipeline by itself, because it takes all of these artifacts and simplifies up and download of them. And in this one we now support value mappings and iflows, and in the next iteration we're also adding script collections and mapping artifacts. But the idea is that you have options to up or download directly from here without having to do much else development. And yeah, it supports all major development environments. It's simple to use. Okay, so we create a Git repository where we can put this into, and we can use a Git repository. So let's create it here, and we'll create a new Git repository called Bootcamp. Bootcamp 2 is available. It is private. That is an important part here. Because you don't want people to get access to your Groovy code, etc. One client was at one time trying to or had published their CPI repository to their GitHub account, and then the IT or security came after us or them and saying, hey, this is not really ideal, sharing these artifacts. So this needs to be private. Good. So what happens is we will go to our CPI system. And yes, questions, put them into the chat. And here we will go to our agents. Oh, let's see if the login works. If the login sometimes does not work, just full refresh and it should get into it. So here we have our Cloud Foundry agent. We can go in here. We can say enable Git. We want to enable all of these. We put in here the Git repository URL we created. CPI dev. This is a local path where the data resides in. We can normally I would just use ERT sync as the branch where we want to have it on, and the user is DGR, and you would then need to create a user for this. So we will need to go into here, our settings, developer settings, personal access token, and here we will generate a new one. Bootcamp 2, and this will expire in 7 days. And this needs repository access. We will generate the token, and I will copy it on the other screen. I'm not sure if it's being saved or what happens with it. So I have now this copied into my browser here, and then all I need to do is press save. So now I have created ideas on how to push that into my Git repository, and what we can then do is we can go and synchronize. So this will synchronize the full library, and you would then be able to see what actually is going on and if we have any artifacts. And luckily for us, we have now created a Git repository. So this have all been initialized by the figaf tool. So all of this happens from the figaf tool, that it publishes this repository and adds all of these details to it. And as you said, that simplifies everything, because here you would have the different components that you have been using. You can check out all the code here, but obviously no one would be using it from here. They would be using an IDE. So let's set up the IDE for this. So let's go back to the presentation. So now we've created our Git repository. We have created an access token. We have set up the path, and obviously you need to ensure that the path matches your user and environment where you're running it. And once we have pressed the synchronize, it is updated, as we saw. And now we need to add it in IntelliJ, and I think that is our preferred tool. And what you do here is go here, say new from version control. You put in the Git directory, and it should pop up with that it is checking out. If you do not have the full credentials, it will pop up and ask you to create a personal access token, etc. for this specific repository. And we can see here it's also initializing the Gradle plugins, and for them to run you would need to add some specific artifacts, and there's a problem with this, and not really sure what that is. But for now we have not configured anything and have not done anything. So what this comes with, it comes with some different settings that we need to set up for it to run. So it comes with a lot of pre-delivered configurations. It comes with the template. So depending on how you set it up, it would always update this Gradle IIT, and then you can have your own version of the build.gradle. Depending on if you want anything specific, you can add it here and then copy between these two things. If you do not know a lot of Gradle like me, then it's probably a good idea just to keep it separate. There is also a setting, and this one links to all the different projects that we have as a part of this. Then the last part is this setting, and here we have the setting to the Cloud Foundry URL. And what we need to do, this is the only thing we would need to copy, so we'll say copy, paste, and we would need to replace it without the brackets or without the IIT. We would need to use the enter the username and the password, and I will do that on the second screen. Luckily that wasn't the password. So so now I've entered the password in the password folder, or in the Gradle here. We need some more stuff to happen before we get started, and if we go back to our project here, so we need to have logged in. We need to get these scripting libraries from SAP. So these are the ones you would be using whenever you are developing scripts, and we can download these two. It would have been nice if we could include them, but licensing wise that is not really a good option. for us to do that. And what I will then do is I will take these two files, and I will, in my IntelliJ, I will create a directory here, directory called libs, where I will paste these two files into. So now we have added these two files, and we have this build.gradle load Gradle settings here. Let's see if it works now. Questions along the way? So this, yeah, I think in the beginning, the first time you run it, you probably need to add Gradle to your build libs or something like that for it to be able to work. Well, other than that, it should configure everything itself, so it is running all of these different scripts. So the build was successful here, and I think we may have to do something here. Not yet. This methods implementation is one we have made, and here we just have a small implement method. So there's a couple of methods that we have not put into our template, but you can just add like that. Good. So now we can view these Gradle plugins. If I can find the location, view. Normally it will pop up over here, and navigate view window. And Gradle, here you have the Gradle plugin. So here we have all of the different tasks in this given project, and what we can do is we now have this iFlow, and we can take the iFlow here. So here we have the different actions that we have created for this iFlow, and if we open this iFlow here in our IDE, we can see we have all the different artifacts that's a part of this. And what we can actually do if we just change this one, I'll show you what this looks like. I will save this file here, and then I will go here to the upload the artifact. Then this will go to the CPI system and try to upload this specific iFlow. And that worked out successfully. So I can go back to my CPI system. So right now we have not done the synchronization yet back to this one. So if we open here, and here's a small shortcut. If you find any of the objects in the change tracking tool, you can easily open them this way, and then it will find the current version of it. And let's see, and it was the resources we had here, and if I remembered, so I made a change into the file that was called demo2. So if I find this file here in the CPI system, we can see we are getting the data right in here, and this makes it a lot easier to develop Groovy script XSLT because you have all the details right there. Good. So that was about how you can use these plugins. Let's see what else we have that I need to remember. So we have the credentials. We need to put in this Gradle IT.properties with username password. We have the Gradle window. If I'd opened the the manual, I could have found it a little easier. And yeah, it can obviously be a little of a challenge the first time you run it in IntelliJ, that you need to link it and set it up the right way. But I think it is somewhat user friendly to find the correct library for it. And we need this missing message implementation. Okay, now, so we have done this. We have been improving on this specific iFlow, and we need to understand how we can actually improve on this this iFlow, because we got a request to make some changes onto it, and this also is quite simple. So we have our test case we created the other day, or yesterday, I guess it was. So what happened here? Okay, strange. Not really sure what happened. But one of the things we have here is we have one of our test cases. What we can go in here, we can look at the different messages that we have, and we have a new a button up here that says generate Groovy scripts, or test cases for the Groovy scripts, and that means we can just click here, add to the Git repository, and that means it will stop. Okay, let's see. What we can then do is we can go back here to our Git repository. We can pull this, and we'll just say merge. And what this will do is, if it worked, we have so we can go here. We can see that there should be a new project under here, here with the test properties. No. Let's see here what happened. Maybe that was once we add to the Git repository. Maybe that is because some of the path did not line up correctly. All files updated. So I think, yeah, this is the Cloud Foundry deployment that could be causing some problems. We have the logs here. That it could not commit to the directory. I guess we need a bracket in the first place here for it to run here on Cloud Foundry. Let's see if that will work. So we just need to reinitialize it. I think there could be two different ways it is being done here. Let's see here. But the idea is that it will create all the artifacts that you would need for running the Git operations. So let's see here if we can pull it. So now we can see we got a test folder here, and in this test folder we got two things. We got some source code. Here we got the input data we need for running this file that's called set headers. And so here's the input, all the content that is relevant, the payload body, and the output we're also getting in. And that means we can run these. So if we just take the set header here, we can run this, where it will take all the data that we have as a part of this and send them into the specific Groovy scripts. We can get the data back, and then we can see if they are performing as we would expect them to do. And here we can see the test result was successful. We didn't see any problems with that. So we are looking at set headers, right? So if we change one of these parameters and run the set header again scripts, we should hopefully see that there is a problem with one of these components. So we can see here that both of these fails, that there was a new error and one that did not exist. So we get all of the information that we need for this. So this is good. This means you can actually run it. But if you actually want to figure out what is going on here, you also have an option to debug. And I think that is one of the powerful things here. And I can just press the debug here. And then it will give me an environment based on the input data that I already have. And then I can go step by step into this. I can see the payload, I can see the message that has been created. I may be able to modify it or run specific scripts in this to see the data that we have at this point in time. And this really is useful if you are doing some complex Groovy development and you want to see, does this really work as we would expect it to do. And all of this without you knowing or needing to understand how you're setting up a complex Groovy environment to run these things, because all of this just happens outside of the box. Yeah, so I could make modifications to this and commit it back to the repository if I was improving my test cases, etc. That was, I guess, most of the Git part. We can run some of the tests, debug. Questions on this Git feature? I am sharing my screen, right? I hope it is just this view that is pending and I cannot see what's going on. But you did see my demo, right? Present a view. Okay, so questions, yes. Okay. So let's see here. Cool. Yes, questions? Screen camera? I need to show. So why is it stop working here? Okay. Yeah, I guess you saw what I had demoed. Questions here. Answer published. No, you can use all Git accounts, Azure DevOps, so it's not just GitHub, it is just a Git account that you need for this to work. Yeah, because they anyway work all the same in this perspective. The only thing is, I think once we started out, you could use the username and the password but now, at least for GitHub, you need to use the credentials, and I think also for Azure DevOps, it's the same Git process that you would be using, and there you also need those attributes. Good. Other questions? Q&A there. Okay. Good. Yes, so there's a lot of advantages in it. Maybe that's also just wanted to show here that you have here a history, and obviously you can see that, so you can show the history here, and you can see if this iFlow was changed at any point in time, who made the change, or not who made the change, but just that it was changed at this point in time. And you can also obviously see it in the Git repository. Here you also have the different changes that have happened into it. So here we can see we had some initializations, and I guess here was probably the one where we should be adding the test cases to the flow. Okay, good. Yeah, and yeah, that means you can also roll back to one of these versions and say, okay, I want to roll back the system, and then you can use these plugins to upload or download this, well, upload and deploy a specific version. One thing you may want to change is here we are uploading a draft version. You can also set it up so it will just upload it as a new version. So that also can simplify some of the processing. Cool. No more questions, and obviously so then the other topic we wanted to cover today is PI to CPI migration. And yeah, why do we want a migration? And why does it make sense to automate this? There's a lot of, well, I think mainly the biggest part is in a CPI or in a PI collection. One of the biggest values you have is how do you say, so the, where does it, yes, so one of the biggest values you have is all the message mapping, all of these artifacts, and the better you can migrate them and handle it, the more value you would be getting from a migration. And that is what you want to be able to do to speed up the migration, because I guess it is a little challenging to get enough developers that are good to do these things. And then I think a large part of a migration is also to be able to test. And as you saw, we are built up on a test tool, and we also have the transport tool. So all of these different things that you're seeing, the versioning, the transport, the Git repository, and the test, is really useful things once you're doing the migration. And I would imagine it's, or argue that it's a lot better to get those delivered before you start the migration and run it, and then once you have the migration, you can start running it and deliver it in that way. So yeah, you would not be able to migrate everything. There is definitely going to be some things that we do not support or do not have really a good way to support, and you would need to redesign in a way that makes sense for you. But the more of these gaps we can limit, the better it is, because the migration becomes a lot easier. So how this works is it fetches data from the PI system, then it takes all of this data, create a BPMN model, converts all of the message mappings with artifacts, and I think that is one of the big advantages, that it has user-defined functions. It has function libraries. They are also converted, and you also have the option to use you can convert channels with XSLT. It will upload it to the CPI system, and then you can test and migrate these test cases. So the installation is pretty simple. We have a Git repository here where we have created these templates for handling the migration, and you just need to add them to your startup, and then it would work. You would obviously need to have it connected to the PI system for it to work. And right now we are just improving the Cloud Foundry deployment to actually be able to connect to the PI system and fetch all of these different data. We do have some things that we need to figure out how to improve in that perspective. But I think right now we should have access to handle the migration and being able to test all of these different artifacts as a part of this migration. But yeah, you need to create this repository, and you probably will take this repository and create a copy of it where you'll be adding your own XSLTs to handle the transformation. That means you can support. So if you just have like one adapter that is being used in a specific way, it probably does not make sense to make modifications. If you have 100 adapters that are using the same setup, you would probably be using or creating a custom XSLT to handle that specific case. Yeah, it takes like 5 minutes to create an XSLT, so that's really not an excuse for not doing it. And yeah, one of the really good things if you have the Git repository installed is that you can actually see a lot of these artifacts as a part of this repository to handle the migration. There you have the data that's needed. So it is pretty simple to handle the migration. So on my Cloud Foundry deployment, I do not have access to this feature yet, but let me just show you what the migration looks like. So here we have the migration feature. I can select iFlow, and we support 7.1, I think, and above, and both classical and ICO based scenarios. So if I take one integration, I'll just do this one. And here we have one here. We can take this one. We can select it. And we can then go and select where we want to have it. Which package, webinar. Oh, and yeah, these cannot start with a number. What I'll need to do is I need to press check here. This will then see if do we have all the artifacts that's a part of this. So do we have mappings for the SOAP adapter? Do we have all of these different artifacts? And then it creates a zip file with all the artifacts that we would be using as a part of this migration. And that means if something fails in migration, you can send this file to us, and we'll be able to support you in the migration. Then you can press preview, and here we can see this the layout of the BPM that is being given. We can see that it is using a message mapping here. All of these different artifacts, that's a part of the BPM model. And then I just press migrate, and then this will take all of these things, the BPMN model, and it would create it. And if it is something you have not licensed before, you would need to license this just like you licensed the DevOps part. But now I can go into my CPI system. And obviously there is some things that you need to set up. So there's change the SOAP endpoint. You need to add user credentials. these kind of things that make sense as a part of the delivery process. So here we have the full iFlow that has been migrated. Sorry. And if we look at the data, so we have both a synchronous and an asynchronous part of this this iFlow. And if we look at, let's take this one. So here we have the message mapping. And if we look at the different artifacts that's a part of this, we can see we have a partner here where we have a user-defined function. And we can read the scripts, and we can see that this is a Git repository, or not a Git repository, a script that we've added that is being used on this specific system. This is using our shared resource capability, which enabled us to actually reuse the same script for multiple scenarios. So if you are making modifications into this script, it will be able to update it in all the different locations where you're actually using this. So making it a lot easier for you to govern these things, because there's two types of iFlow objects. There is or mappings. There's function libraries. They will not have these container artifacts as we have, and then you have the one that is built into the PI message mapping. They would have container artifacts. So if you have something that is using a lot of containers, you would need to find a way to get around that. But anyway, that's probably the case. You would have dynamic attributes that needs to be converted to exchange properties. These kind of changes would need to happen. And then the FGAF tool, if we look at this in the tracked object, we will be able to see all of these artifacts, and we can see here that some of these artifacts is shared resources, and that means they've been used in multiple integrations where this iFlow has been made. That means if I make a modification, synchronize it, I can decide whether or not I want to update it in all of these different artifacts. And you can always also use this for other objects that you're reusing in multiple iFlows, that you have all of these different data that you can join and send to specific iFlow and use the data in there. Cool. Yes. Yeah, so once you have taken the iFlow and configured it, you can obviously use the transport process to transport it in the landscape and move it into your productive system using the tickets as the FGAF tool has. If you want to test it, you can find the different test cases that you have. Let's see if I have anyone for this scenario. Probably not. I will need to get that. Okay. Let's just say we had this one we wanted to use for it. We can open the agent test cases here. We can select one or more of these test cases, and then we can say, okay, migrate these two test cases to the CPI iFlow that we have created on our target system. So this is here is just to say, okay, here, this one. Then it comes up with some suggestions about which messages should be mapped to which data, and if this matches, then it is good. But I guess in this case we do not have these elements in this input thing, so maybe it will give us some problem. But the idea is that we now have created these new test cases. So if we see here, we have a test case here for this, and we can then press run and run on our D system. and this will, yeah, we're not sending the right data to it, but it will give us an idea about what is actually possible once we are transporting or configuring iFlows to handle something like this. So we can take PI test data, run it, and then we'll see how it performs on the system. So using the full development suite and test cases we have for this process. Let's see here. I would hope it gives some error. Otherwise something is wrong. And obviously you would need to go through this. Yeah, so it has some problems that, yeah, the iFlow was not deployed or something like that. Yeah, it does not make sense for us to also deploy it, because you would anyway need to go through this this iFlow, make the corrections so it matches the setup that you would need for this. But with this you have all the artifacts that you need to run a good test. And it is just as simple to create test cases on the PI system as on the CPI system. Questions? And if we just look at the Git repository, so we have GitHub Gap, we have this template library, and here you can see the different structures or files that we have to handle scenarios. And what it takes is it takes a communication channel, PI communication channel object, and then it creates this structure here. And the way you find this structure is you go to here, and here you can then open the BPMN model, and then you can see, okay, we have this is the collaboration. Here we have the HTTP communication channel. So you copy just all of these attributes once you have configured it, put them into this structure. You can use external properties, and if you want, you can extract this external properties and set them down here. And give specific user notifications that they would need to fill in before they can start running and testing with this this integration. Okay. Other questions? Yeah. So that's the quick setup of the questions. What is possible, how to handle migrations, and as you saw, it is pretty simple to set up the tool, and you then just need to add these two extra components, and then you obviously need to connect it to the PI system with a user that has some pretty good access on the PI system. To be able to use the APIs, to be able to fetch messages from the APIs, and create these different connectivities. So yes, hopefully that that would simplify and save a lot of time on your migration procedures, because yeah, that is a big part of it. And then yeah, you have the transport capabilities, as you saw, to simplify even more of the processing. So that was what I wanted to cover today. I hope you got some idea on what the tool can do. Hopefully you've also had some time to set up the tool and be able to see it in your own system, in your own landscape, and get idea about what can actually be achieved using the tool and how much time, effort we would be able to save in this part of the process to handle these things. Because yeah, this is something that I think a lot of developers are spending a lot of time on, and the more you can automate these things, the better. So that was all I wanted to cover in this. I do hope that you would go through the, I think I have one of the first slides, that you will go through the tutorials. We do have the license you can get if you just create 2 transport and 2 test cases using the tool. Then you can get 2 months extra license of the tool, and you would be able to see how it behaves in your landscape and what is possible there. And you can either run it in Cloud Foundry, or you can run it on your on a spare server somewhere in your landscape. So that was all I wanted to cover.